Hello everyone, welcome back, and thank you for joining us on the Unreal with Glover U podcast, where every week Jeff Glover will dive deep into the questions that you are asking. He understands the challenges you are facing on a day-to-day basis because he still works every day on the front lines of real estate, with him and his team closing over 1,000 homes per year. We are currently on episode 3 of our 7-part series, where Jeff is going to go deep into the 7 steps of an effective real estate agent's business plan. On this episode, Jeff will go over step 3, production goals for next year. In this step, Jeff will help you understand where you want to take your business production next year. You can download a blank copy of the business plan at www.gloveru.com/2019plan. Now, let's hear from Jeff Glover on continuing with your business plan for 2019.
I want to know what your production goals are for next year. So part 1, you gave me an idea where you're going to end up financially, some of the ratios and so forth, some of the numbers. Part 2 is where your business came from. And part 3 is where you want to go next year. So let me walk you through it. So first things first on the plan, I want to know what your closed deal goal is. I put that as number 1 because quite honestly, if you worry about the numbers, everything else will fall into place. I had early on, one of the top sales guys that I worked with, his name was Dave Calzadillas. He worked at a furniture store with me. He always said, Jeff, worry about the written and the deliver will take care of itself, meaning just worry about the units and the volume will show up, the income will show up. So we have down there closed deal goal, and it says next to that sales written times 80%. Now, if you've been in this business for a long time, you might get 90% of your transactions to the closing table. On the other hand, if you're pretty new to the business, you might only get 60 or 70% of your deals to the closing table. In my experience, the average realtor is about 20% fallout, which means that they write 5 deals, meaning 5 go pending, 4 are going to close. All right, this other one's going to fall apart. Maybe they'll buy something else. Maybe they'll fire you, go work with someone else because the deal fell apart. Who knows? But I know if you put 5 deals on the pending board, 4 are going to make it to a closing table. So in theory, if you wanted to close, say, 30 transactions this year, how many deals would you have to write in order to close 30 transactions? Obviously, the number's 36. You'll see further down where we put that. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your goal for next year. Closed deal goal is about 80% of your written sales. So if you write a plan to write, you're writing a plan to write business. The close will take care of itself. Worry about the written, the delivered will take care of itself. So your closed deal goal is going to be about 80% or 4 out of 5. Next, your total income. I want to know what kind of income you're bringing in off of that production. Well, how will I know that number? Well, on step 1, we determined what your income was and how many deals you did. And if I'm not mistaken, we determined what your average commission check will be. So since we know your average commission check, I can take your total closed deals goal times your average commission check and figure out how many deals you're actually going to close. Or I'm sorry, how much income you're actually going to make. So if your closed deal goal is 30 transactions and your average commission check is $3,000, it's pretty simple. 30 times 3, that's $90,000 in income that you'll make. All right, so that goes up top. Below that is your total expense. Now, this gets a little funky. Total expense, if you're a solo agent, meaning you're on your own, you're doing your own thing, you're a part of a brokerage, let's say, but you're not a part of a team that takes some things off your plate. All of my mentors have always said, if you're a solo agent, you can plan on anywhere from 25% at a minimum to 50% as a maximum going to your expenses. So in other words, if your income ends up being $100,000, you're going to spend anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 to procure and close and transact that business. Think about it. We're talking about buying Zillow leads, spending money on photographers. If you hire an assistant, obviously money needs to go towards an assistant. So a solo agent's business, you can plan on 25 minimum % going to your expenses, up to 50% depending on how lean you run the business. I will tell you, in my experience, most solo agents that I meet and work with, that we work with at Glover U, are around 35% of their income goes towards expenses. All right. So if they make $100,000 in commission checks, 35%, $35,000, they're going to end up netting taxable income of $65,000. Very common for solo agents to be about 35% based on what I've seen. Minimum 25, it's almost never less than 25 unless you're really only doing 6 or 8 deals a year. I mean, everyone's going to have gas expenses and showings and so forth, MLS dues. 25% to 50%. Most agents that we work with, I find, are about 35% of their income is going towards expenses. All right. Now, if you're on a team, it's a little different. The teams usually pick up some of those expenses for you. Your expenses are usually a lot lower. Most teams we work with are anywhere from 5% to 10% in terms of expenses. So you get a 1099 for $100,000. Your take home, your taxable income, if you will, I shouldn't say take home because we got Uncle Sam, but your taxable income is going to be more like 90 to 95,000. It's very normal for agents on teams. About 5 to 10% of their business goes towards expenses. So of course you got to look at solo, team, what percentage of my revenue is going towards expenses. If you're on a team, it's substantially less. Now, I understand, of course, agents that are on teams, they have commission splits with the team, which are generally not as favorable as solo agents. So that's why their expenses are substantially lower. So we're not going to have that conversation. That's a whole nother podcast. That's actually another series I do called Split versus Net. What is my actual take home? We'll talk about that at a later date. You can Google it. You'll find it out there, I'm sure. But I want to know what your total expenses are going to roughly be. Agent on a team, 5 to 10%. Solo agent, you're going to be somewhere around 35%. All right. Then we get your net taxable income. And that's pretty simple. You subtract your income from your expenses and boom, there you go. Next, I have days to be worked. How many days I plan on working? I want you to plan in advance how many holidays you're taking off, how many breaks you're taking. I want to know if you're working Saturdays and Sundays. I don't propose that. I recommend everyone just work maybe 6 days a week, 5.5 days a week, not 7. That one's pretty easy to figure out. There's 52 weeks a year. Okay, let's say you say I'm going to work 6 days a week. Okay, well, that means there's 52 Sundays that you're not going to work. If we subtract 52 from 365, you're going to end up somewhere around 310, 315, minus a few vacations and some holidays. Most agents are working anywhere from 275 to 300 working days, especially if you're working some Saturdays. The average American that works on Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, is working like 250 to 260 days. All right. Of course, if I know how many days I'm going to be working, then I should be prospecting every day. So then I would know how many hours. Well, I'm going to prospect 2 hours per day times 300 days. That's 600 hours of prospecting for the year. And I also know that I'm talking to about 10 people per hour. So if I'm doing 2 hours of prospecting a day and I'm talking to 10 people per hour and I'm already at 600 hours of prospecting, that would be 6,000 contacts that I'm going to make in the coming year. Out of 6,000 contacts, how many appointments am I going to set? Well, everyone's ratio is going to be a little bit different there. For me, I can set one listing appointment for every 10 to 15 people I talk to. Brand new licensees, they might have to talk to 50 people to get one appointment set. Most agents I find can talk to about 20 to 25 people and get an appointment set. So 6,000, all right, divide that by 25. That'll get me my listing appointment set if I'm only looking for listings. Then I need to figure out, all right, well, if I'm going on 100 listing appointments, let's say, how many listings am I going to take? National Association of Realtors say you take about 1 out of every 3, 33% of the appointments you go on. Our standards at Glover U are a little higher than that. We expect a minimum of 50% and a maximum of about 75%. Well, why wouldn't I go to 80 or 90? Well, that's because we have you work in both groups of people. If you only work your sphere and past clients, you're going to probably be 85, 90%. But if you're also working business from people that you've never met before, your numbers are going to be a little lower. So your minimum standard should be about 50% gone on to taken. Again, we'd like to get you closer to that 60, 70% number. That's where I've been at for years. That's where a lot of our top associates are. Well, if I'm going on 100 listing appointments and I'm taking 65 listings, let's say, they're not all going to sell. I sell 80% of my listings, so that means about 12 or 15 are not going to sell. So I take 65 and I sell 50. Okay, not bad. Good. I got my 50. Perfect. Buyer consultation goals. How many new buyers am I going to meet? Put that number in there. How many buyer consultations am I going to do? Remember, a first showing counts. A brand new buyer and their first showing counts as a buyer consultation in our world, as long as you're having a conversation with them about purchasing a home and not just opening the door. All right, so then I need to know how many buyer consultations am I going to do? Well, I probably could do a couple of those a week times 48 weeks. Okay, let's say I can do 100 of those a year. Great. How many offers am I going to write? Well, in most cases, most agents write one offer for every 4 buyers that they meet. So if I'm meeting 100 different buyers and I'm going to write 1 out of 4, well, then that means 25 offers I'm going to write. Well, how many offers of those am I going to get accepted? There's my buyer sales goal. So if I write 25 offers, I might get 18, 20 accepted. Now, of course, as the market softens, you're going to get more and more of your deals accepted, which is a nice thing about a softening market. Now, I said most agents meet 4 buyers, write 1 offer. Most. The agents that work with us, it's more like you meet 4, you're writing 2. All right, so if I meet 100 buyers this year, I'm going to write 50 offers, and I'm probably going to get 30 to 35 of those offers accepted in a hot market. In a slower market, I write 50 offers. I'm probably going to get more like 40 or 45 of those accepted. So the buyer's offers written, buyer sales goals go down there. Next, I take the 2 and combine them. All right, so let's say I have total sales of 50 listings sold. I have total sales of 25 buyer sales. That's a total of 75 written sales. How do I know what I'm going to close? I take 20% of that number, which is essentially 10%, 7.5. So 20% is 15. All right, what's 75 minus 15? 75 minus 15 is 60. So if I write 75 deals, I'm going to close 60 transactions. Boom, I put my closed deal goal of 60 transactions. Goals for hours worked per week. Again, that's start time and end time. Goals for days worked per week. Probably 5.5, 6 days a week, depending on where you're at in your business. I would also encourage you to make a note. How many weekends do you want to take off? I think everyone deserves at least 1 full weekend off per month in this business. Maybe you take every other weekend off. I've been doing this 15 years and I'm still working every other weekend. So I do take a weekend off every other week now. Of course, we go back to the total contacts added to the database, people that I've met. Total contacts added to the database, people I haven't met. You can use a scenario that we did in one of the previous podcasts about how do I determine that number. Well, that's based on contacts and appointments gone on, right? If I'm talking to 20 people per day, at least one of those is going to be a good conversation. And if I'm going on 3 appointments a week, at least one of those is going to be a good appointment. That's how I'm determining who I'm adding to the database and setting a number there. So there is for part 3, your production goals for 2019. And I want you to establish those numbers, pay close attention to it, and join me next time when we get into point 4 or part 4 of the Successful Glover U business plan, which is the ratios and numbers required to achieve my goals. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for taking the time to join Jeff today with the Unreal with Glover U podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Search for Unreal with Glover U on iTunes or Podbean and subscribe today. Until next time, remember, winners hang out with winners. Losers hang out with losers. Become a winner by hanging out with one.